Welcome. You are listening to Sleepy Historian. If you are awake, you may stay awake. If you're tired, you may rest. There is nothing here that needs quick attention. Nothing will demand urgency from you. Tonight, we are moving slowly into a place where urgency never helped very much anyway. Take a moment to settle your body. Let your breathing find a steady pace. Not deep, not forced, just even. You do not need to imagine yourself clearly. You only need to listen as time passes. Within the first moments of this story, the cold is already present. It has not arrived suddenly. It does not announce itself. It is simply there, waiting, as it always has been. We're going far back, before written calendars mattered here, before borders meant anything in the snow, before Siberia was a word spoken with certainty. This land does not begin with people. People arrive later. The ground is already frozen when you arrive in thought. Not frozen for a season, but frozen in layers, hardened over generations. Soil that does not soften, even when the light changes. Above it, the air moves slowly, carrying no warmth with it. Wind does not rush here. It presses. It leans against the body for long periods of time. You would notice it first on exposed skin, then beneath layers, then deeper still. In ancient Siberian winters, cold was not an event. It was the condition of existence. If you were standing here now, you would not feel shocked. Shock belongs to sudden things. This cold teaches patience. The sky is pale, even at midday. Light spreads thinly, like something rationed carefully. There is no promise in it. You begin to understand quickly that warmth is temporary. Fire fades. Bodies cool. Shelters hold heat only briefly. Nothing stays. People who lived here long ago did not expect relief. They did not wait for comfort. They planned for continuation. You may picture them loosely. No faces are necessary. Heavy clothing stitched by hand. Furs layered not for luxury, but for survival. Each movement costs energy. Each breath is measured by the body without asking permission. You would learn quickly to move less, to speak less, to preserve what remains. In this place, winter does not feel like an obstacle to overcome. It feels like a long state of being. Days pass quietly. Sometimes the difference between night and day is difficult to name. The body learns the cycle through hunger and fatigue, not clocks. Food exists, but never in excess. What is eaten today must be thought about tomorrow. You would not starve immediately. Starvation here is slow. It arrives in stages so subtle they feel like normal life. The cold presses in during sleep. Even while resting, the body works to stay warm. Sleep is light, interrupted, practical. You wake often, not from fear, but from awareness. The fire must be checked. The shelter must be listened to. Wind speaks more than people do. If you listen closely, you may notice how quiet this world is. Not peaceful, just empty. Sound travels differently in cold air. It carries farther, but there is less of it. Silence becomes familiar. In ancient Siberian winters, survival was not heroic. It was repetitive. The same actions, performed carefully again and again. Hands grow cracked. Breath forms clouds that linger briefly, then vanish. Tools are handled gently, because mistakes cannot be replaced easily. There is no rushing here. Rushing wastes warmth. You would learn to accept slowness. The body insists on it. When people gathered together, it was not for comfort. It was for efficiency. Share heat, shared labor. But even together, isolation remained. Beyond the small circle of light from a fire, there's only distance. White ground, dark shapes of trees or hills, standing without concern. The land does not respond to effort. It does not reward bravery. It allows endurance. Some winters lasted longer than memory could hold clearly. Stories blurred together. One season folded into the next. You might begin to lose track of beginnings. You might forget when the cold first started. That forgetting was normal. As you listen now, you do not need to hold on to details tightly. Let them drift past. Let the wind carry them. This history is not told to excite you. It is told to pass time gently. If you fall asleep, the cold will continue without you. If you wake later, it will still be there. That is how this land has always worked. In the hours ahead, We will move slowly through the long winters of ancient Siberia, through routine, through waiting, through bodies adapting to limits. There will be no sudden rescue, no dramatic turning point, only continuation. For now, allow yourself to rest into the pace of this place. The wind does not hurry, the cold does not argue, and neither do we. You begin by standing still, because movement here is never the first decision. In ancient Siberian winters, stillness is how the body learns what the land is offering and what it is taking away. The ground beneath you does not feel solid in a reassuring way. It feels closed, locked, frozen beyond negotiation. This earth has been cold for longer than anyone remembers. Layer after layer beneath your feet has never softened, not even during the brief seasons when the light lingers longer in the sky. Roots do not travel easily here. Neither do footsteps. When you look outward, there is no clear boundary to the land. The horizon does not arrive sharply. It fades slowly into the same pale tones that fill the sky. Above you, the frozen sky hangs low and wide. Clouds move without urgency. Light spreads thinly, as though it must conserve itself. You would not call this brightness. It is visibility without warmth. The wind does not strike you. It surrounds you. It presses evenly against your clothing, finding every loose seam, every place where heat might escape. At first, you notice the cold on your face. Then your hands. It begins to feel as though the cold is inside the air you breathe. Your body adjusts its priorities quietly. Circulation shifts. Fingers stiffen. Movement becomes careful, not from fear, but from economy. In this place, unnecessary effort is costly. People who lived here long ago understood that the land did not change for them. They changed for it. You would see no roads, no markers, nothing that suggests arrival or departure. The ground stretches outward in shallow rises and dips, shaped by wind and time rather than water. Snow does not always pile deeply. Often, it is scoured away, leaving hard surfaces that reflect light faintly, like dull stone. When you walk, the sound beneath your feet is muted. Snow compresses, ice holds. Each step sends a quiet signal through your legs, reminding you that balance matters. Falling here is not dramatic, but it is inconvenient. Getting back up costs warmth. You learn to shorten your stride. The sky remains the same color for hours. There is no sharp morning, no confident afternoon. Time announces itself only through the body. Hunger arrives. Fatigue follows. If you stop and listen, there is very little to hear. The wind moves. Sometimes it pauses. Then it resumes, as if remembering its task. There are moments when everything feels suspended. The air, the land, even thought itself slows. Ancient Siberian winters train the mind to accept repetition. The same view, seen again and again, with only small differences. A shadow shifts slightly. The light thins further. The temperature drops without comment. You would not expect the cold to worsen suddenly. It does not need to. It is already sufficient. Clothing grows heavy as moisture freezes within it. Furs stiffen. Every adjustment requires patience. People here did not waste words describing the weather. It was always the same conversation. Cold meant planning. Cold meant staying close. Cold meant remembering where shelter waited. But even shelter is never far from the land itself. Low structures, partially dug into earth or snow, designed to reduce exposure rather than eliminate it. When you look up again, the sky seems larger than before. Not because it has grown, but because nothing interrupts it. There are no tall forests here to block the wind completely. Trees, when present, stand thin and sparse, shaped by years of pressure. They do not reach upward confidently. They endure sideways. The cold enters thought as well. Decisions simplify. What must be done? What can wait? What should not be attempted today? You begin to understand that travel is not about distance. It is about tolerance. How long can the body remain exposed? How much energy remains for return? People who misjudged this did not disappear dramatically. They simply did not arrive. When names were spoken later, there were pauses. Space is left where answers used to be. You learn not to look too far ahead. The land does not reward anticipation. Instead, attention stays close. The ground in front of you, the feel of the air on your face, the condition of your hands. This closeness is not anxiety. It is survival. As the hours pass, the cold settles deeper into the routine of being awake. It becomes part of the background, like breathing. You may notice that your thoughts slow, not because of weakness, but because speed is unnecessary here. The land does not move quickly. Neither do you. In ancient Siberian winters, people measured life not by ambition, but by continuation. If the day ended with everyone still breathing, it had been successful. As night approaches, though it is difficult to say exactly when it begins, the light fades further. The sky darkens slightly. The land looks much the same. The endless ground remains. The frozen sky holds, and you're still within it. You begin to understand the weight of survival, not when you lift something heavy, but when you wear it for hours without relief. Clothing here is not chosen for comfort. It is chosen for consequence. Furs are layered carefully, each one adding warmth, each one adding burden. They press down on your shoulders. They restrict the bend of your arms. They resist sudden movement. At first, you notice how much effort it takes simply to turn your head. Moisture from breath gathers along collars and seams. It freezes quietly. By the time you notice it, the stiffness has already set in. You learn to move with what you are wearing, not against it. Every piece of clothing represents time spent preparing. Hides cleaned slowly. Stitching done by hand, often in poor light. Mistakes corrected because there was no replacement. Nothing is decorative. When you adjust a sleeve or tighten a wrap, you do it slowly. Quick motions trap cold air inside the layers. Slow movements allow heat to settle again. The body teaches this without explanation. Shelter, when it appears, does not look permanent. It looks temporary by design. Low structures pressed into earth or snow. Walls thick, entrances narrow. Openings made small enough to discourage wind. You must lower yourself to enter. Standing upright is not encouraged here. Inside, the air is darker and warmer, but not warm enough to relax completely. Heat gathers near the ceiling, where you cannot reach it easily. You learn where to sit, where to sleep, where not to linger. Shelter is not a place to forget the cold. It is a place to reduce its reach. Fire becomes central without becoming comforting. It is watched constantly, not admired. Fuel is stacked carefully, measured by nights, not by hours. Every piece burned is one that will not be burned later. You do not feed the fire unless it asks. Smoke lingers inside shelters, clinging to clothing and hair. It stings the eyes slightly. People accept this without complaint. Clear air belongs outside. When you lie down, the ground beneath you still carries cold. Layers of hide and grass soften it, but do not erase it. Sleep is shallow. The body remains aware of temperature changes. If the fire dims, you wake. If the wind shifts, you wake. Rest is conditional. Clothing stiffens overnight. In the morning, it resists being worn again. You must warm it slowly, allowing the fibers to soften. There is no rushing into the day. People who lived here understood that protection always demanded effort, even while wearing it. The weight of clothing teaches restraint. Gestures become smaller. Movements economical. You do not wave. You do not stretch unnecessarily. Every motion costs heat. Shelters require maintenance. Snow builds against walls. Entrances must be cleared carefully, without exposing too much interior warmth. This work is done daily, often in silence. The cold does not pause while you prepare. You begin to feel how the land presses inward, not aggressively, persistently. The shelter holds only as long as attention remains. Neglect invites cold inside. At night, sounds outside feel distant but present. Wind moving across open ground. Ice settling. Inside, breathing and fire are the loudest things. People gather close, not from affection, but from sheer necessity. Body heat matters. Still, space is respected. Movement is limited. You learn where your body fits among others, where warmth overlaps without discomfort. These patterns repeat every evening. There is little variation. Clothing is checked. Shelter is sealed. Fire is measured. The routine does not become comforting. It becomes familiar. As days pass, the weight you carry feels less noticeable, not because it has lightened, but because the body has adjusted its expectations. Strength is not built here. Endurance is. The shelter never feels entirely safe. It feels sufficient. That is enough. When you step back outside, the cold is waiting patiently. It has not changed its position. The sky remains pale. The ground remains hard. You pull the weight of your clothing around you once more and continue, understanding now that protection is something you carry constantly, not something you step into and leave behind. Time begins to behave differently once warmth is no longer something you expect to keep. In ancient Siberian winters, warmth is brief and conditional. It appears near fire. It gathers between bodies. Then it thins quietly without asking. You stop thinking of time in hours. You begin to think of it in intervals between tasks. The moment after tending the fire. The time before food must be eaten. The stretch between waking and sleeping again. These are the markers that remain. Outside, the light does not offer much guidance. It arrives pale and withdrawn. It leaves without ceremony. Some days, the sky seems unchanged from morning to night. The body senses the difference anyway. Hunger arrives first. Not sharply, just a steady reminder. It is not painful. It is persistent. Food is prepared slowly, because frozen things do not rush. Meat is sliced carefully, hands stiff from cold. Chewing takes longer than you expect. Eating is quiet work. There is no warmth that spreads afterward. Only the knowledge that energy has been added back into the body, enough to continue. After eating, you wait. Waiting becomes a central activity. Waiting for the fire to need attention. Waiting for light to shift. Waiting for the wind to change direction. The cold does not recede during these waits. It settles more deeply. You begin to feel it in places that once seemed protected. Beneath layers. Along joints. The body does not complain loudly. It adjusts. You move less. You sit longer. You conserve. Conversation, when it happens, is minimal. Words are useful only when necessary. Breath is saved. Silence does not feel awkward. It feels appropriate. The mind, given fewer distractions, turns inward. Thoughts slow. Memories stretch out. People remember other winters. They remember the same cold. Repeating. There's no sense of novelty here. Only continuation. Sleep arrives irregularly. Sometimes quickly. Sometimes not at all. When you sleep, is not deep. The body remains alert to temperature changes. You wake when the fire fades. You wake when the shelter shifts slightly under wind or snow. Even rest has effort inside it. Morning does not feel like a beginning. It feels like a return to the same state. You rise slowly. Clothing is stiff again. Hands take time to regain movement. There is no rush to stand upright. Standing costs energy. Outside, the land remains unchanged. The endless ground holds its shape. The frozen sky hangs above it. There is no promise of warming later in the day. There rarely is. People plan without optimism. They plan realistically. Tasks are chosen carefully. What must be done today? What can wait? Travel is limited. Exposure is measured. The cold encourages small territories. Areas close to shelter. Paths known well. Going beyond them requires consideration. Time passes slowly, but not emptily. It fills with maintenance. Snow is cleared. Firewood is arranged. Clothing is checked for damage. Small repairs matter. A tear left unattended grows quickly in this environment. Cold finds openings easily. The body begins to feel older regardless of age. Joints protest quietly. Muscles respond more slowly. This is not illness. It is the cost of living here. Some people withdraw into stillness. They sit longer. They speak less. Others remain active, but carefully. Both approaches are accepted. There is no single way to endure winter, only the need to endure it. At times, the mind drifts. Thoughts repeat. The same images return. Firelight on walls. Breath in the dark. Wind passing outside. This repetition is not boredom. It is survival settling into rhythm. You may notice that you no longer expect warmth at all. You expect only degrees of cold. Closer to the fire. Farther from it. Inside shelter. Outside it, these distinctions matter. As the days pass, the body adapts to this scale. What once felt unbearable now feels ordinary. That does not make it safe. It makes it familiar. Some evenings, fewer people speak. Names are fewer. Not everyone answers when spoken to. No one dramatizes this. Life continues around the absence. Time, without warmth, stretches forward without shape. There is no clear midpoint. No sense of nearing an end. Winter does not announce its duration. It simply continues. You learn not to imagine its conclusion too vividly. That kind of thinking wastes energy. Instead, attention remains narrow. The present moment. The next task. The cold remains constant. The land remains patient. And within it, time moves on quietly without warmth. Food, in ancient Siberian winters, is not something you seek freely. It is something the land permits. You do not wake thinking of meals. You wake thinking of availability. What remains? What can be reached without unnecessary exposure? What can be taken without losing more warmth than it provides? Hunger does not arrive suddenly. It settles into the body and stays there, quiet but constant. People eat not to feel full, but to remain functional. The cold changes how food behaves. Frozen meat must be cut slowly. Fat hardens. Hands lose feeling before the task is finished. You learn to work with limited sensation. Blades are guided carefully. Mistakes cannot be afforded. Food is prepared close to the fire, but never too close. Heat must be shared. No single task is allowed to claim too much of it. Cooking, when it happens, is simple. There is little boiling, mostly warming. The smell of food is faint. It does not linger. Eating is done quietly. Chewing takes time. Cold affects the mouth and jaw. Muscles move stiffly at first, then more easily. There is no conversation about flavor. Flavor is not the purpose. Nutrition is understood through experience. Fat is valued. Anything that produces lasting energy is remembered. Food sources are limited by season. In winter, choice is narrow. What was preserved earlier is used now. Dried meat. Frozen portions saved carefully. There is no abundance to mismanage. When hunting occurs, it is planned with restraint. Only when conditions allow. Only when the cost is understood. A failed hunt wastes energy. A successful one must be shared. The cold preserves food, but also limits access to it. Frozen ground resists digging. Snow hides remains. You learn where caches are kept. You remember landmarks not by sight, but by feel and direction. Eating schedules are flexible. Some days include less. Some include almost nothing. The body adjusts. Energy is conserved elsewhere. Movement slows. Tasks are reduced. Hunger becomes familiar, but never comfortable. People speak less during these periods. Talking costs warmth. Silence surrounds the act of eating. Respect, not ceremony. Children, elders, and the injured are considered first. Not out of sentiment, but practicality. The group survives together or not at all. Food is portioned carefully. No one argues openly. There's an understanding that winter will test patience more than strength. After eating, there is no rush to stand. Digestion requires warmth. People remain near the fire longer. They sit still. They allow energy to settle. Outside, the cold continues its work. The sky does not change. The land does not respond. Food does not provide comfort here. It provides time, a little more movement. Another night survived. Over time, people become thinner. Faces sharpen. Clothing fits differently. This is noticed without comment. The body learns to use what it has efficiently. Waste becomes impossible. Occasionally, there is slightly more food. A successful hunt. A fortunate find. These moments are not celebrated loudly. They are absorbed quietly. The knowledge that scarcity will return tempers any relief. You eat slowly. You chew completely. You swallow carefully. Each meal is an agreement with the cold. You accept what it allows. When food runs low, activity narrows further. People stay closer to shelter. Exposure is minimized. Winter encourages patience. The rhythm of hunger and eating becomes part of timekeeping. You remember days by what was consumed. The cold watches all of this without response. It does not interfere. It does not assist. It simply remains. And so do you, eating what the cold allows and nothing more. Over time, the cold stops announcing itself and begins to settle into the body as a constant condition. In ancient Siberian winters, the body does not fight the cold continuously. It learns to live alongside it. At first, you notice stiffness in the morning. Joints respond slowly. Muscles resist movement. This is not pain in the way people elsewhere might describe it. It is resistance. The body takes longer to warm itself. Blood moves where it is needed most. Extremities become secondary. Hands lose precision. Fingers work more by memory than sensation. Tasks that once felt simple now require attention. Tying, cutting, adjusting clothing. You learn to accept this limitation. Feet grow them often, not dangerously so at first, just enough to dull feedback. You check them regularly. You press them against the ground. You wiggle them slowly. Neglect here is costly. Skin grows rough. Cracks appear along knuckles and heels. They heal slowly. Cold air dries everything it touches. Breathing becomes shallow without effort. The body conserves moisture and warmth. Long inhalations feel unnecessary. Over time, posture changes. People hunch slightly, shoulders drawn inward. This is not fear. It is efficiency. Heat is protected instinctively. Clothing helps, but cannot prevent all loss. Wind finds openings. Moisture freezes. The body remains aware of temperature at all times. Sleep, already light, becomes more fragmented. People wake to adjust position, to add fuel, to check others. Rest is taken in pieces. As weeks pass, strength shifts. Muscle mass decreases. Endurance replaces power. People grow slower but steadier. Movement becomes deliberate. There are fewer wasted gestures. The cold teaches economy. Illness is rare, but weakness is common. The difference matters. Weakness can be managed. Illness threatens balance. People watch one another quietly. Changes are noticed. Someone moving less. Someone speaking less. No one asks directly. Observation replaces conversation. The body adapts its expectations. What once felt unbearable now feels manageable. This does not mean safety has increased. It means tolerance has. Hunger and cold together create a particular fatigue. Not sleepiness, a heaviness. You sit longer. You rest more often. Thoughts narrow. The mind focuses on immediate needs. Long-term plans feel distant. This narrowing is protective. The cold also affects memory. Days blend together. Details blur. You remember patterns more than events. Firelight, wind, breath. Faces are seen mostly in low light. Expressions soften. Words become fewer. Bodies communicate through presence rather than speech. Children grow quieter. Elders move even more slowly. Everyone adjusts without instruction. When someone stumbles, others pause. They wait. Helping costs energy, but not helping costs more. Hands are placed on arms. Support is given without ceremony. The cold reduces urgency in everything except survival. Even injury is handled calmly. There is no panic. Pain is acknowledged and managed quietly. The body becomes a tool that must be maintained carefully, not pushed. People learn their limits intimately. They feel them before reaching them. This awareness keeps many alive. Still, not all adjustments succeed. Some bodies respond less well. They tire more quickly. They recover more slowly. When this happens, the group adapts around them. Tasks are reassigned. Movement is reduced. No one speaks of loss ahead of time. The cold does not allow that kind of thinking. By now, you no longer expect your body to feel warm. You expect it to function. That is enough. The cold remains present in every joint and breath. But it no longer demands attention constantly. It has become part of the background of being alive. And the body, changed but persistent, continues to move within it. Waiting becomes the dominant activity once movement is reduced to what is necessary. In ancient Siberian winters, waiting is not passive. It is deliberate. You wait because the cold demands it, because light is limited, because the body cannot afford constant motion. Daylight, when it arrives, feels thin and unreliable. It does not stretch far across the sky. It barely lifts itself above the horizon. You do not greet it with excitement. You note its presence and use it. Light allows tasks to be done with less risk. Repairs, sorting, checking supplies. When light fades, you stop. Inside shelter, the fire becomes the center of timekeeping. Its brightness signals attention. Its dimming signals action. People watch it carefully. You learn to read small changes in flame and sound. A shift in the crackle means moisture. A pause means fuel settling. These details matter. Waiting fills the hours between these moments. People sit still for long periods. They conserve energy. They listen. Outside, wind moves steadily. Sometimes it stops entirely. These pauses feel heavier than movement. Silence presses inward. During long nights, thoughts slow further. The mind drifts without urgency. Memories return without invitation. Other winters, other camps. There is no sense of nostalgia, only recognition. Waiting allows the cold to settle deeper. It finds its way into joints and bones. People adjust position often. They shift weight. They draw clothing tighter. Stillness is never complete. The darkness inside shelter is familiar. Firelight creates small islands of visibility. Beyond that, shapes blur. Eyes adjust. You stop expecting clarity. Conversation happens rarely and quietly. When it does, it is practical. Who will tend the fire next? When to rest? When to move? Stories, if shared, are brief and repeated. There is comfort in knowing what comes next. Outside, the land waits as well. The frozen ground does not change shape. The sky remains low. There are no signs to interpret, no omens. Waiting stretches. Some nights feel longer than others. This is not measured by time, but by fatigue. Sleep arrives in fragments. Short rest between tasks. You wake often, not startled but alert. You check the fire. You listen. When morning returns, it does so quietly. Light seeps back rather than rising. People acknowledge it with movement rather than words. Tasks resume. The cold remains unchanged. Waiting is not frustrating here. It is accepted. It becomes part of the rhythm. People learn that acting too soon costs more than waiting. That patience preserves warmth. The land teaches this lesson repeatedly. As days pass, waiting fills more of life than action. This is not failure. It is adjustment. You begin to understand that survival here is not about doing more. It is about doing less, carefully. Light is used when it appears. Darkness is endured when it returns. There is no attempt to force either. The cold remains patient. So do the people within it. Waiting for light becomes waiting for continuation. Another day, another cycle. Nothing more is expected. And so you sit. You watch the fire. You listen to the wind. And time moves forward slowly, without urgency. At some point, the days stop feeling separate from one another. In ancient Siberian winters, this moment arrives quietly. There is no clear beginning to it. You simply notice that yesterday and today feel nearly the same. The land offers no markers to help you divide time. The sky repeats itself. The ground remains unchanged. Light arrives thinly. It leaves thinly. You wake, not because the day has started, but because the body requires attention. Hunger, cold, the fire. These needs do not follow calendars. Tasks repeat with small variations. The same clothing is worn. The same shelter is maintained. You check the same seams. You clear the same entrance. Each action takes slightly longer than it once did. Not because it has become more difficult, but because the body has slowed. This slowing is subtle. You do not notice it immediately. Movement becomes more deliberate. Pauses between actions lengthen. The cold has worked its way into habit. People speak less about plans. Plans assume too much change. Instead, attention remains fixed on what must be done now. Fire, food, shelter. Beyond that, there is little to discuss. Waiting fills more of the day than activity. People sit, wrapped tightly, watching the fire burn down and be fed again. Outside, the wind follows familiar paths. It moves across the same open ground. It presses against the same walls. Its sound becomes predictable. Silence grows longer between gusts. During these quiet stretches, the mind wanders gently. Thoughts circle back to the same ideas. How cold it is, how long it has been, how it will likely continue. These thoughts do not cause alarm. They are observations. The body grows accustomed to this mental stillness. You may forget small details. Which day it is. How many nights have passed. This forgetting does not matter. What matters is that the fire remains lit. That clothing remains intact. That food remains available. The plateau of survival begins here. There are no new challenges, only the same ones repeated with slightly less energy. Hunger is steady. Cold is constant. Fatigue does not spike. It spreads evenly. People become quieter, but not withdrawn. They remain present. Faces appear calm, even when tired. The cold has smooth, sharp reactions away. If someone moves more slowly, others adjust without discussion. Tasks are redistributed quietly. This cooperation is not spoken of. It simply occurs. You begin to feel that time itself has thickened. Minutes stretch. Hours blur. There is no sense of progress. This lack of progress is not discouraging. It is expected. Ancient Siberian winters were not meant to be completed. They were meant to be endured. The land does not test resolve. It tests patience. During the longest stretches of waiting, the fire becomes almost hypnotic. Flames rise and fall slowly. People watch them without urgency. Sleep comes and goes. Short periods of rest blend into wakefulness. Dreams, when they occur, are simple, familiar places. Warmth remembered vaguely. Waking brings no disappointment, only acceptance. Outside, nothing announces change. Snow may fall lightly, or not at all. The ground looks the same either way. You stop expecting signs. Days do not advance. They accumulate. Each one adds weight rather than direction. The body carries this weight quietly. There is no sense of being trapped. This is simply where life is taking place. As long as the routines continue, survival continues. The plateau stretches forward, wide and flat, and within it, the days remain uncounted and unchanged. In this extended plateau of survival, some absences become noticeable not in loud ways, but quietly. People do not fall suddenly. They do not vanish dramatically. Their presence simply diminishes. You notice it first in the small tasks. Someone no longer tends the fire with the same steadiness. Another moves slower than yesterday. A voice you expected to answer does not. These are quiet losses. They are not tragedies shouted across the land. They are gaps in routine, in rhythm, in shared survival. The body becomes more fragile with time. Even minor fatigue can limit action. Hands that once handled frozen meat with careful precision now tremble slightly. Feet that navigated uneven snow hesitate. Others adjust around these changes. There's no grief, only continued attention to necessary tasks. When names are called during checks, some do not respond. Not in fear, not in panic, simply because they do not rise again. This is understood without explanation. The cold does not mourn. It does not demand explanation. Life continues quietly. Meals are prepared with slightly fewer hands. Shelter maintenance is done in smaller increments. Movements are measured even more carefully. The remaining people learn to accept the absence. The gaps are acknowledged by attention to the practical, not by lament. Sleep fragments become even shorter for some. The mind grows quieter. Memory seems less urgent. Outside, the wind does not pause for anyone. The sky continues its pale, unchanging arc. Snow drifts as it always has, indifferent to absence. Children, if present, notice through subtle cues rather than words. They follow routines without comment, learning resilience by observing adaptation. The fire, steady and small, becomes a symbol of continuity. It does not replace the lost presence, but it holds the group together. The rhythm of sparks and warmth is a tether. People speak less. Silence fills the spaces where words once were. Losses are absorbed into routine. They do not become stories for remembrance. They are integrated into the day-to-day survival. No one complains. No one celebrates. The cold does not change because someone is gone. The wind does not soften. The snow does not pause. The land continues as it always has. It offers no consolation. It offers only persistence. Your attention narrows further. You focus on essentials: fire, clothing, food. Everything else is peripheral. You learn that endurance is not measured by presence, but by continuation. The act of persisting becomes more important than counting the living. Even as losses accumulate, people maintain a quiet rhythm. Small gestures sustain what remains. Movement, feeding, observation all continue. This is survival without ceremony. It is practical, necessary, unadorned. And you, observing, participating, feel the weight of absence. Not in shock, not in grief, but in the subtle elongation of time, in the quieter spaces where life once filled. The cold carries on impartial. It does not mark who remains or who is gone. It only surrounds those who continue to endure. And within that endurance, life, fragile and careful, persists. At some point, the endless repetition begins to feel like a boundary. Not a wall, not a trap, but the edge of the plateau itself. Days do not advance as before. They feel flattened, extended, yet fragile. You sense it in the body first. Muscles that once adapted now protest more readily. Hands grow colder despite careful layering. Breath carries slightly more weight. The mind notices next. Thoughts circle more slowly, more deliberately. Memory becomes selective, keeping only what aids survival. People begin to move differently. Each step is considered. Every motion costs energy that cannot be wasted. Even simple gestures are weighed. Reaching for a piece of firewood, adjusting a piece of fur, shifting position on the ground. This awareness does not cause anxiety. It is practical, a quiet acknowledgement that endurance has limits. The edge of the plateau is not sudden. It arrives incrementally, like a faint slope underfoot. Tasks that once seemed small now feel larger. Snow clearing requires longer attention. Fuel must be rationed even more carefully. Clothing is adjusted repeatedly to maintain warmth without overexertion. The group recognizes this instinctively. No words are exchanged. Movements synchronize naturally. The cold presses more insistently. Wind no longer surprises. It tests slowly, steadily. Small gusts nibble at unprotected joints. Even furs fail in corners and seams. People respond with calm efficiency. Nothing is wasted. Everything matters. Inside, the shelter feels smaller. You are more aware of its limits. Space for movement is calculated. Resting positions are adjusted for warmth and efficiency. Sleeping arrangements shift subtly. Body heat is shared with precision. Closer than before, but not crowded. Meals are smaller. Preparation is slower. Eating quietly becomes almost ceremonial in its repetition. The edge of the plateau is mental as well as physical. Awareness sharpens, but expectation softens. No one hopes for sudden change. No one fears it. Time feels denser here. Hours do not pass. They accumulate. They settle. Observing the environment takes patience. Snow drifts along familiar paths. Shadows stretch across frozen ground. Branches crack under weight silently. Every sound is noted. Every movement considered. Nothing is wasted. Some people withdraw into stillness. Others continue minimal activity. Both approaches coexist. The plateau does not reward action. It rewards preservation. You feel the rhythm of survival more keenly now. Each task, each breath, each small movement has weight. Each decision carries consequence. The cold teaches clarity. Efficiency becomes instinctive. Even as monotony deepens, subtle variations emerge. A slightly harder wind, a small frost forming on the shelter's walls, a new patch of ice along a path. These differences are noticed, but not dramatized. They are observed, responded to, and then integrated into routine. The edge of the plateau is not frightening. It is instructive. It reveals endurance in its quietest form. Here, survival is not heroic. It is continued, patient, and measured. You exist in the rhythm of repetition. You notice the shifts, respond carefully, and wait. The plateau stretches onward, but you understand now that its edge is the point at which adaptation and attention must remain precise. Anything less risks slipping quietly into failure. And so, with calm persistence, you continue along this edge, steady and deliberate, observing time that feels immobile, yet moves inexorably forward. After long weeks or months of life dominated by shelter, fire, and the cold, there comes a moment when you step outside deliberately, not as part of hunting or travel, but to feel the full expanse of the frozen land again. The return to the open air is not triumphant. It is quiet, measured, necessary. The first breath of cold air sears gently, reminding you that your lungs are still functioning. Fur-lined hoods and layered clothing buffer most of it, but the chill is present nonetheless. You notice your fingers, stiff and slow, and your toes, reluctant to move. The ground underfoot is familiar, yet unfamiliar. Snow has drifted into new patterns. Footprints from previous days are partially erased. Paths you once walked confidently now require attention. Movement is deliberate. Every step costs energy. Every glance at the horizon reminds you of distance and exposure. You feel the wind against your face. It is neither hostile nor welcoming. It simply exists, a constant that has always been there. Above, the sky stretches wider than inside the shelter. It is a muted gray, heavy with potential snow. Light diffuses unevenly, casting long, shifting shadows across the frozen ground. Your body responds slowly to this expanded space. Muscles remember warmth differently. Breathing deepens with cautious acceptance. As you walk, you notice the land's subtle details. Snow clinging to branches, glittering faintly. Frozen streams, partially obscured by ice and wind-blown powder. Shadows stretching longer than expected in the low winter light. Every observation is measured, every action deliberate. Survival continues in these small attentions. The group accompanies you sparingly. They maintain proximity to shelter. The edge of comfort is respected. No one pushes recklessly. Even standing still requires thought. The wind tugs at clothing. Loose layers must be adjusted. Hands must be moved to preserve circulation. Time outside is not counted in minutes. It is counted in breaths, in the attention needed to remain safe. Here, light is more than illumination. It is a guide, a measure of distance, a silent cue for retreat. The body relearns balance. Even the act of walking across uneven snow demands focus. Previously trivial movements, like climbing a slight incline, now hold weight. Eyes scan the horizon, not for beauty, but for orientation. You note landmarks you might have ignored from within the shelter. Familiar rocks, a distant tree line. These small markers reassure, not delight. The cold is still present, pressing gently against your skin. It is no longer a shock, but a constant companion. You have adapted to it, but it remains. Movement outside is slower than inside. Tasks that once felt effortless require renewed attention. You notice the weight of your body in space. The rhythm of limbs must be recalibrated. Quiet observation dominates. Every gust of wind, every shift in snow, every subtle change in light carries meaning. When the group returns inside, the shelter feels simultaneously smaller and more protective. You notice its walls differently, appreciate the warmth not just for comfort, but as a rare tool against the vastness outside. This first return to the open space teaches the body and the mind that endurance has limits, but observation and patience extend them. It is not an awakening. It is a continuation. The outside air does not offer promise. It offers clarity. And in that clarity, survival continues, measured, deliberate, unhurried. Time remains heavy. The land remains patient. And you, once again, return to the shelter, carrying with you the calm knowledge that even in the expanse, survival is practiced one deliberate step at a time. Returning to the open expanse, even briefly, introduces subtle challenges that the body has not faced in weeks. Your lungs, accustomed to shallow, cautious breathing near the shelter, now expand with the cold air. Each inhale carries the crisp weight of winter, sharp but necessary. Exhalations release more warmth than expected, and you notice how much energy breathing requires. Movement, once automatic, demands attention. Muscles that had learned economy now remember motion slowly. You lift a foot, shift weight, pause, and adjust balance. Each step is deliberate, measured, calibrated against frozen ground that offers little forgiveness. The body is relearning itself. Hands, once stiff, regain some flexibility after gentle movement. Fingers respond more fluidly, though numbness lingers at the edges. Every adjustment requires awareness. Dropping an object or misjudging pressure can be costly. The rhythm of walking becomes a meditation. Footsteps crunching against snow, synchronized with controlled breathing, produce a slow cadence. Every motion is evaluated in silence. You become aware of weight distribution, posture, and energy expenditure. The air itself carries resistance. Cold penetrates clothing at edges. Moisture, frozen from exhalations, clings lightly to fur and skin. You notice the subtle sound of frost cracking under your steps. The wind, if it rises, is a gentle but constant force demanding adaptation. Even the act of turning your head requires consideration. Muscles remember stiffness and resistance. The neck adjusts slowly to minimize unnecessary energy use. Eyes scan the horizon cautiously, yet fully aware of the frozen expanse. Breathing teaches patience. Rushing leads to cold air entering too quickly, chilling the lungs and throat. Slow, measured inhalations and exhalations restore control. The body recalibrates, learning to accept the wider range of oxygen and temperature differences. Every movement is deliberate, yet necessary. No step is wasted. The body remembers its previous endurance lessons, but must integrate them with new demands. Time outside, even a short period, stretches perception. Minutes are measured not by clock, but by energy and observation. You note how long limbs remain functional, how long warmth lasts before needing recovery near the fire. Returning to shelter brings relief, but it is not comfort in the usual sense. The body relaxes only partially. It must conserve even while regaining energy. The lungs still carry the cold's memory. The muscles, the joints, the tendons, all retain traces of the outside's resistance. This process repeats daily, gradually expanding the radius of movement. Each excursion is longer, each breath more complete. The body relearns its capabilities slowly, with deliberate awareness. Mental adaptation accompanies the physical. You notice your surroundings in greater detail. Every slope, every drift, every shadow becomes a reference point. Orientation is not assumed. It is observed. Even minor misjudgments are accounted for carefully. The mind and body work together in quiet collaboration. Efficiency and patience remain more valuable than speed or force. You discover limits you had forgotten and acknowledge them without frustration. In these moments, the world is both vast and intimate. The body feels every detail of the environment, yet the mind understands the slow pace of adaptation is survival itself. Returning indoors, near the fire, the process continues. Muscles relax incrementally. Lungs warm. The mind reflects quietly on the careful steps taken. Relearning motion and air is not an event. It is a continuous negotiation between body, environment, and survival. Each breath and each step reinforces the patience required for enduring the Siberian winter. You do not hurry. You move deliberately. You breathe slowly. And you learn again the measured rhythm of life in extreme cold. As bodies relearn motion and the lungs adjust to cold air, the social aspect of survival slowly resumes its subtle rhythm. In a long isolation of Siberian winters, people had drifted into quiet coexistence. Now, the return to outdoor tasks, to shared duties, reintroduces a gentle communal pulse. Communication remains minimal. There is no chatter or laughter. Words are practical, sparse, deliberate. Feel low. Fire needs tending. Food ration checked. These simple phrases structure the day. They coordinate activity without breaking the calm endurance that governs the group. Shared movement reinforces trust. Someone carries firewood. Another clears snow from the shelter entrance. Each task is performed with awareness of others' positions. Accidental collisions or rushed gestures could cost energy or warmth. Observation becomes a form of support. You notice if someone's shoulders slump more than usual, if fingers falter while handling tools, if steps are slower or more careful than before. Without comment, adjustments are made. The group shifts silently to compensate. Someone carries more weight. Someone else moves less. Rhythm emerges from repetition. Mornings follow familiar patterns. Checking fire, assessing clothing, distributing small rations. Days outside are measured carefully, with rotations for who ventures and who remains near shelter. Evening routines are precise, tending fire, adjusting bedding, preparing for the next cycle of light and darkness. The small ceremonies of daily survival return their quiet significance. Sharing warmth while sitting near the fire. Passing a portion of food without speaking. Nodding acknowledgement of a job completed. Children, if present, mirror this rhythm. They learn by mimicking movement and observation, not through instruction. Even silence teaches them endurance. The mental fatigue of isolation begins to ease slightly in the structure. Uncertainty diminishes as roles stabilize. Trust, earned through repetitive and deliberate action, solidifies. The group functions as a single organism, each movement synchronized, each breath calibrated. Yet the cold remains impartial. The wind presses, the snow drifts, and daylight remains short and pale. The environment demands attention at every step. The rhythm is not comfort. It is a means of continued survival. Small adjustments are made with each day. Tasks are redistributed based on energy, skill, and necessity. People learn to anticipate each other's movements, creating a silent choreography that preserves heat and strength. Even shared moments are tempered. A glance toward another signals caution. A hand offered in support is brief but precise. The group becomes a measured community, not social in the ordinary sense, not emotionally vibrant, but functional, deliberate, and sustaining. Over time, the repetition of tasks and the synchronized rhythm of survival cultivates a quiet resilience. People adapt to each other as surely as they adapt to the cold. They learn the limits of their companions, and in doing so, extend their own endurance. Nightfall is approached without urgency. The fire is tended, clothing is checked, and positions are adjusted. Everyone moves deliberately, understanding the value of each small motion. The day ends not in triumph, but in continuation. No one celebrates, no one laments. The rhythm carries quietly forward, reinforcing the social cohesion necessary to endure. In this way, community is relearned, not through speech or ceremony, but through observation, careful action, and the steady beat of life in extreme winter conditions. It is subtle, unremarkable, and yet profoundly sustaining. After months of measured survival, after endless waiting, careful movement, and quiet communal rhythm, reflection becomes a companion. You do not reflect with joy or despair. You reflect with awareness, with patience, with a quiet understanding of the limits and capacities of the human body and mind. Endurance is no longer an abstract concept. It is concrete. It is felt in stiffened joints, in slow breaths, in careful calculations of energy. It is measured in the precision of tasks performed, in the rhythm of the fire, in the weight of rations. You notice the subtle changes in yourself. The body that once responded eagerly to exertion now moves deliberately, conserving energy. Hands retain memory of work done, even as fatigue presses. Eyes scan the frozen landscape with both caution and understanding, noting patterns invisible to the untrained. The mind, too, has shifted. It no longer rushes. It no longer chases illusions of time or progress. Thoughts circulate gently, like snowflakes drifting in the wind, slow, inevitable, precise. Endurance is as much mental as physical. It is patience. It is observation. It is the acceptance of discomfort without letting it dominate attention. You begin to recognize patterns in the cold, in the light, in the wind. Some days are slightly harsher, some nights slightly longer. Yet these variations are navigated with quiet repetition, practiced awareness, and adaptation. Losses are acknowledged without grief. Quiet absences, small gaps in the community are folded into the rhythm of survival. The fire continues. The food is rationed. The shelter remains maintained. This is endurance distilled, sustaining life without flourish, without drama, without hope for change. It is presence, attention, and careful action. The plateau of survival has taught a strange clarity. Progress is measured not in milestones, but in continued existence. Time becomes weighty, almost tangible, each hour carrying a small, precise lesson. The land imposes patience. You respond with measured motion. Observation becomes meditation. The small details matter more than grand gestures. The wind's direction, the snow's density, the fire's flame, each requires attention. Ignoring them invites discomfort. Attending to them preserves life. Community, too, becomes defined by subtlety. Support is shown in small gestures. Movements are synchronized without speech. Tasks are distributed according to energy, skill, and necessity. Endurance is collective as much as individual. Reflection reveals that survival is neither heroic nor tragic. It is unremarkable in its repetition. It is quiet. It is deliberate. Yet within this quiet lies profound learning. You understand your own thresholds. You understand the patience required of the body and mind. You understand the weight of time and the subtle lessons of presence. When firelight flickers across shelter walls, when shadows stretch long across frozen ground, you feel continuity. You feel connection to the land, to companions, and to the rhythm of survival itself. Not triumphant, not celebratory, but present. Endurance is an unbroken attention to the small, essential acts. It is not about overcoming the cold. It is about moving through it with awareness. Not about mastering the land, but about inhabiting it carefully, respectfully, deliberately. Reflection does not conclude with revelation. It concludes with understanding that survival is a slow negotiation between body, mind, and environment. That patience is as vital as warmth. That observation is as vital as motion. And so, in the quiet of this endless winter, you continue, breathing slowly, moving carefully, observing constantly. Endurance is no longer something you endure. It is simply the way you exist. As reflection deepens, the differences between ancient survival and modern life become evident, not through judgment, but through observation. The contrast is quiet, subtle, and instructive. In these winters of Siberia, every action is deliberate. Clothing, food, shelter, fire. Each element requires constant attention. The environment tolerates nothing. Small errors carry consequences that cannot be postponed or ignored. Compare this to modern safety, where many of these dangers are buffered. Heat is constant. Food is abundant. Shelter is impervious to cold. Time is measured by clocks, not by survival needs. Risk is mitigated by infrastructure, technology, and planning. In ancient winters, survival depended on attentiveness and endurance. Modern life can remove the immediate need for these skills. Yet in doing so, it also removes the slow, reflective understanding of limits. You notice it in your body. Muscles, once finely tuned for efficiency, now relax. Breath, once cautious and measured, becomes automatic. The mind, once alert to subtle shifts in temperature or sound, now wanders more freely. Yet this freedom comes at a cost. Awareness is dulled. Patience is less demanded. Observation is less necessary. In the shelter, surrounded by companions, you realize how survival shaped rhythm and behavior. Meals were small, timed carefully, movements deliberate, tasks shared according to necessity. Every element of life demanded attention and participation. Modern safety removes many pressures, but also the clarity that comes from enduring the cold and the monotony. The slow lessons of endurance, of patience, of observing without expectation are rarer now. We no longer gauge time by the fire or by the thin daylight. We measure by clocks, appointments, and deadlines. You reflect on the value of both approaches. Safety allows comfort, longevity, and the ability to pursue abstract goals. Ancient endurance teaches presence, observation, and precise action under constraint. There is no desire to romanticize hardship. The cold does not reward effort with satisfaction. It only permits continuation for those attentive and patient enough. Yet there is something profound in that quiet tension. The body and mind sharpened by necessity. The community bound not by leisure or conversation, but by shared survival. Every routine, no matter how mundane, carries importance. The contrast is also a mirror. Modern comfort can make small inconveniences feel burdensome. Ancient endurance taught resilience. It demanded that each action be meaningful, each breath deliberate, each motion weighed. You realize that patience and observation, skills learned through isolation and extremity, remain valuable, even if modern life rarely requires them. They are internal tools, capable of guiding action when challenges arise. And so, as the winter endures, and as you sit quietly beside the fire, there is a subtle clarity. Ancient survival is not heroic. Modern safety is not effortless. Both are states that teach lessons differently, quietly, without spectacle. The cold remains. The wind still presses. The snow drifts. Yet, the mind carries reflection beyond the shelter. In endurance, both ancient and modern, is understood not in triumph, but in quiet continuation. And so, after months of measured survival, repeated routine, quiet observation, and patient endurance, the final calm sets in. There is no fanfare, no sudden resolution, no dramatic change, only continuation, gently folding into reflection. The fire burns steadily, casting long shadows on the walls of the shelter. The wind drifts outside, moving across the frozen land as it always has. Snow piles shift slightly with the passage of time. The environment remains indifferent. You notice the subtle details, the way light falls across fur-lined clothing, the faint scent of wood smoke mingling with the cold air, the quiet sound of someone adjusting their position near the warmth. All is measured. All is deliberate. All is calm. The body feels settled. Muscles retain memory of careful movement. Breathing is steady. Hands, once stiff, flex with familiarity in their daily tasks. The mind rests in attentive observation, aware yet unhurried. Community, small and focused, continues its rhythm. Tasks are distributed with practiced precision. Movements are synchronized without need for words. The subtle pulse of survival persists, quietly, deliberately. Outside, the tundra stretches vast and unchanged. Shadows lengthen and shorten with the muted movement of the sun. Drifts accumulate, and the wind whispers over frozen ground. The world is patient. It does not demand celebration. It only permits presence. In this stillness, reflection deepens. You acknowledge what has been endured without embellishment. Losses are understood. Adaptations are recognized. The slow accumulation of days, weeks, and months weighs lightly, yet undeniably, on memory and body. There is no longing for modern convenience, nor for escape. Only a quiet recognition that endurance, patient, deliberate, and constant, has been practiced and maintained. Time continues. It is heavy, tangible, yet unobtrusive. The cold persists. The snow drifts. The fire glows steadily, a tether to warmth, continuity, and calm. And in this final calm, you feel the unremarkable profundity of survival. Not in heroics, nor in struggle dramatized. Simply in continued presence. Measured, attentive, patient. The winter is vast. The tundra remains indifferent. And you, steady, deliberate, enduring, exist within it fully. This is the final calm closure. A quiet conclusion to months of endurance, adaptation, and reflection. No narrative uplift is required. No resolution beyond continuation. Only the still, measured rhythm of life against the cold, indifferent land. And so, as the fire flickers and the wind drifts, the story of survival closes softly, leaving behind the gentle weight of time and the quiet imprint of human endurance.